Center, the other tower of the World Trade Center has just collapsed. You are looking...
On September the 11th, Americans had many questions. Who attacked our country? The evidence we have gathered all points to Al-Qaeda. In Afghanistan, we see Al-Qaeda's vision for the world. The United States respects the people of Afghanistan, but we condemn the Taliban regime. Mr. Speaker, Vice President Cheney, members of Congress, distinguished guests, and fellow citizens. As of this month, Afghanistan has a new constitution guaranteeing free elections and full participation by women. The men and women of Afghanistan are building a nation that is free and proud and fighting terror, and America is honored to be their friend.
We hear on the news quite often negative reports about the Middle East, when in fact there are very positive stories that come from that war-torn country. This isn't just my story. This is a story about thousands of Afghan students working together for a better future for their country. This is a story of hope. Well, I'd just come back from spring break from our university, and I was preparing my students for final exams. And I get this letter in the mail that I had been called to active duty to report in 30 days. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be called up for 2 or 3 weeks to maybe help with activation of troops at the redeployment center. It said, if found physically fit, you will be assigned active duty C, Section D. And I go B, C, D. 545 days. The first thing that went through my mind was, what am I going to tell my wife? We've never been separated more than a couple of weeks. And I'm getting ready to leave for 1.5 years, and I don't know why. And so I went through all of those emotions trying to come up with a plan to tell her. Eventually, she calls me on the phone and goes, how was your day? And I said, we got to talk. She said, I'm really busy at school. I'll call you back. I get back home, she calls me back and says, I'm really busy. Can you just tell me over the phone? I went, okay. So I told her I've been called to active duty for 545 days and I'm leaving in 30 days. And she hung up. It was like a shot in the gut, like a gut shot, you know, that you hit, because everything was right. I would sit out on my front porch and I'd just get a rigor about how perfect things were. And then things all of a sudden weren't perfect. I'm low crawling in a low crawl pit with 17 and 18-year-olds. And I've got a drill sergeant badge on my pocket. I'd been a drill sergeant for 10 years. I'm wearing eagles up here. My next promotion, I'm a general. And after 3 days, we quit. We basically said to them, what are you going to do? You going to send us home? You going to send us to Iraq? You going to send us to Afghanistan? Tell us where we're going. The operations office is headed up by a young major. I walk into his office and I looked at him. I said, lock the back door. And he did. And I turned around and I locked the front door. I said, I'm not leaving till I find out where we're going. And he said, well, sir, you're going to Afghanistan. So when are we leaving? He said, tomorrow at midnight. No prep. And we're deployed to a war zone. I tried to sleep as much as I could in hopes that I would wake up from the worst nightmare of my entire life. That didn't happen. My initial impression of Afghanistan, while it may not be the end of the world, is pretty close.
When you looked around Kabul, you had an appreciation for the fact this has been a country that's been in armed conflict for a quarter of a century, because you saw buildings that were partially destroyed. You definitely got the feel it was a third world country.
As we drove through the city of Bagram, I looked around, I looked up, I looked in the mountains, I looked ahead, and I'm like, where in the world am I?
It was tense. I mean, you know, there's no getting around it. You had a loaded weapon you carried with you at all times.
And then, of course, when you're there, we're surrounded with all these Afghans. Of course, you want to trust every single one of them, but you also know that any one of them could be a Taliban. So you're always alert, and you're always securing each other. You're always watching each other's back. But you want to do it in such a way that you're also open to them, so they're willing to come to you and you don't have a fear relationship. You have a working relationship.
Every time there is a suicide bombing in Kabul, I always, look to see in the newspaper where it physically happened. It really makes you wonder was it your time? Was it my time in that crowded plaza? No, it was not. My thoughts for those who don't come home are in my heart.
During the day, it was relatively quiet, but at night, you would hear the prayers from the mosque. And it was haunting. You realize you're not in Oklahoma anymore.
General Weston, who was the OMC Alpha commander, we met with him several times, and he said, the West Point model of sending people over here is great, but what we really need is we need some longevity. That's when we looked through the files, and none of them had any background except this one dude from Oklahoma.
And he said, I've noticed on your bio that you have been Board of Examiners certified for colleges and universities. You've taught all these grade levels. You were a drill sergeant, taught at the Drill Sergeant Academy. Basically, your entire adult life, you've been an educator. We would like for you to build a 4-year university for Afghan students using the United States Military Academy at West Point as the model. You have $65 million and 11-member full-time staff, but you only have 10 months to accomplish the mission. And I looked at him and I said, are you kidding me? Sir, that would be a dream job for me. I get to build a university. He said, 2-year vision. He said, 2 days from now, I want a briefing between you and the 2 West Point faculty that are here. 2 days later, the general says, I hope you know you don't have any money for this project. Well, 48 hours earlier, I had $65 million. What about the staff? Well, you don't have them either. The only thing that didn't change, I had no money, I had no staff. The only thing that didn't change was I have 10 months to build the university. Now, I'm still in this idyllic world that Colonel Shoup and Colonel Wallace are going to be there as long as I am. I did not realize they were leaving in about 2 weeks.
Dave Wallace and I looked at each other and went, we just traveled how many thousands of miles for this? And we're going to turn around and leave. And so the first part of it was to effectively fight for money.
In 2004 was the first democratic elections for the Afghans. Our money had to be regenerated to get the security established to make sure that we could have the democratic elections so we could then move forward. So I talked to the general about this and I said, General, I'm a school teacher by trade and I'm used to my budget being cut. That's what happens to school teachers. I've never had a budget cut this much. I had no idea how we were going to do it. And so I asked Colonel Shoup, what are we going to do? He said, Jim, it's very simple. You sell a dream.
People often don't ever really think about how you go about building a 4-year academic institution. They're just there. You build a facility, you build the first-year curriculum, and you start teaching the first-year curriculum, and then you stop and say, okay, Now we got to build a second-year curriculum, because when the first year ends, they're going to have to roll into it. And they did this every year for 4 years.
We wrote an entire policy and doctrine in 45 days for an entire university that included curriculum and assessment and how basically the thing was going to be developed.
Everything was in a blueprint format. We kind of knew what the structure was going to be because we knew what West Point was all about. We kind of knew what the agreements were with the Afghan government at the time. The first thing that we needed to be able to identify was a location for it, because we had no physical structure, no physical facilities.
At that point there, we did not have any cadets. We didn't have any faculty. We didn't have the academy. We knew where we wanted to place the academy.
Colonel Nasons and I worked with the Afghan leadership and decided to convince them to move the academy from Karga to the old Air Defense University, which already had structures intact. And it was right there by Kabul International Airport. So it was very secure. And that was an important thing for us to have it as being very secure.
All the rooms were full of junk. There were no doors, there's no windows. It was a bad state. And so one of the first things that we saw as important to our mission was to get the facilities correct.
Then we had to find our faculty. We had approximately 1,200 applications. We interviewed 200 of the faculty for the initial 25 positions. We asked one individual who had applied for the social science departmentship if he could name an American leader. And he throws his shoulders back and gets very excited, and he says, "Yes, Mr. Abraham Clinton." He goes, "He freed the slaves, but he had an affair." That was some of the answers that we would get from these individuals that we were interviewing. But every one of them very sincere, and every one of them wanting to work with the academy. But after we had vetted through everyone, we ended up with our 25 initial faculty for the academy, and we started the training of them. And that was where my role came in, where I taught the Afghan faculty the Western style of teaching.
They looked at different military academies. They looked at different models. And when they did that, they said, that's the one we want. We want something like West Point. This is a country, their military, their former way they trained officers was more of a Soviet style, was far more focused on training.
The Russians were very much an army of occupation that was trying to build a Soviet satellite. And we were there trying to facilitate the creation of a nation that could stand on its own. Once they recognized that they had the authority to guide the creation of these programs, not only did they embrace that authority, but they also were all the more receptive to our input, because they recognized that our input was only, that our motivation was only to help them produce a better institution.
That's what we're developing. We're developing critical thinking skills, communication skills, leadership skills, okay? That's what we're in the business of. We're not just being very directive or prescriptive and standing up and lecturing you on the assembly or disassembly of the 50 caliber machine gun. That's not what this is. We're talking about teaching people to learn.
The intellectual and technical environment that was present in Afghanistan during the Taliban era was oppressive and gave them no opportunities to expand their horizons. And then suddenly the Taliban fell and we arrived, and this whole new world opened to them, and they were like sponges. They wanted to absorb everything they could possibly absorb in the time that we had together.
We had no heat. We had no electricity. We were in a building that was 44 rooms and had one light bulb in it. And when the light bulb came on, that meant we had electricity. And we only had electricity 1 hour a day. So we worked that way for a month or so, and then I hit the jackpot. Chief Petty Officer Clint Rainey was the go-to person that the commander turned to quite often. He bought the dream. So he convinced the commander to take excess funding that came in and funnel it into a budget for the academy. We ended up building the academy on $3.7 million, and that just got the academy started. Minister of Defense Fauci, who was the head of the education program, came to the academy to watch the students come on board. He throws his arms around me, gives me this big bear hug, and said, "Hang up the sign. I will issue the order. No one will challenge." When I got it, I took it out to the front gate to put it up. The Afghans did not want me to do that. They wanted to put it up for me. They was afraid that I would fall and hurt myself. I have a photo of me hanging up the sign and then throwing my arms up in the air, kind of in a victory type position. But out of that picture is about 40 Afghan individuals preparing to catch me if I fell off that piece of equipment, right, that wall.
It was just amazing. I mean, everybody that came from Karzai all the way down, knowing that this was a key moment in terms of the opening of this institution that was going to help them professionalize their officer corps for their Army and for the future.
You're extremely tense. Is anybody going to show up? Were we able to make all these connections? But it's just amazing how industrious and how the Afghan people work to make things happen. And that's exactly what they did. They made it happen.
In November of 2004, we assessed our first group of cadets. That the first 3 days, 114 of the 115 students that we eventually had for a class showed up. 5 weeks later, the 115th cadet showed up. He shows up at the front gate. They'd already gone through 5 weeks of cadet basic training. They only had a week or two more to go. The general told the cadet, "You can't come in. You have to go home." And the young man said, "I can't go home. I don't have a home to go to." Finally, the General Sharif, who was the Afghan superintendent of the academy, said, "Go see Colonel Wilhite. If he will accept you, I will accept you." 3 weeks prior to the academy cadet basic training beginning, he left his home in the northeastern region of Afghanistan. The first day out, he totals his car, so now he's afoot. The second day out, he's robbed of everything he has. For the next 7 weeks and 5 days, he walks across that country and shows up at our gate to get a degree at the National Military Academy of Afghanistan. And he's told, "You can't come in." And I said, "Son, welcome to the National Military Academy of Afghanistan. You're going to make a fantastic soldier." He was on the march the next day and 4 years later graduated as one of our honor graduates. The pin that I wear on my jacket is the pin from the first graduating class of that group, and they presented that to me at West Point. I shook the hand of every cadet, wished them the best of luck. I called them my sons. I told them that I would see them in the future. I was quite proud of that moment, to see those kids get started in a new career. These young men are my sons. I am their father. And I fell in love with the Afghans through dealing with that.
Having had the opportunity to get to know and really develop a rich professional collegial relationship and rich friendships with these young Afghans has made me a totally different person and a substantially better person for having gone through that process. And it's they personally who enriched my life in ways that I can't even really properly articulate.
When I went back in 2010, this dream, this aspiration, this thing we were building one brick at a time, it was for real. I mean, it really, so I remember driving through the gates of NEMA there, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's really a school. It's a school with buildings and faculty and students and books and a soccer field. It's like all those meetings, all those cups of tea, there it is. And again, it was like this rush of sort of joy as I saw this thing that actually came into being.
I do think the military academy is definitely a positive force in that direction. It's one of the few institutions that deliberately draws people from every area of the country, or as many areas as are logistically possible, and brings them together to work as a team. And that's essentially what West Point did for the early United States. I think it was key in our development, to the extent that Afghanistan is finally successful in becoming a modern nation. I think the NMAA will play a similar part.
People of Afghanistan are just an absolutely wonderful people across the board. They're caring people. They're very resilient people. I mean, think about how many decades and centuries Afghanistan has been at war.
I will never forget that a couple of years ago, the new superintendent, General Zaza, and I had an opportunity to have lunch together at West Point. And he shared with me that the biggest threat to the Taliban is not bombs and bullets. They've been at war for 25 years or longer. The biggest threat to them is education. And once these people receive their education and it starts to expand and they realize they have choices, the Taliban will be no longer. And you were a part of that.
When you have the privilege of serving with people in that type of setting, you develop lifelong friendships because you're with people 24 hours a day. So I walk away from that with a group of colleagues that I will call friends forever.
Beyond 2014, America's commitment to a unified and sovereign Afghanistan will endure. But the nature of our commitment will change. We're negotiating an agreement with the Afghan government that focuses on two missions: training and equipping Afghan forces so that the country does not again slip into chaos. This spring, our forces will move into a support role, while Afghan security forces take the lead.
A mentor of mine always used to quote a line from Henry Brooks Adams, which goes something like, "A teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops." And my reason for hope for the future of Afghanistan and my optimism about the future of the National Military Academy is really embodied in the fact that those early graduates are now integral to the institution. And that's really quite exciting to see.
In 2005, I returned home from Afghanistan. In 2006, my wife and I were invited back to West Point to meet with General Sharif and his staff. While there, we asked General Sharif specifically, when will women be admitted to the academy? And he said, 2009. He did not hesitate. He said, we do not have the facilities at this time for them, but we will by 2009. I have photos of the assessment group of 2009 getting ready to go and take their Concord exam. Right in the middle of it is the first female taking her exam. Afghanistan needs women doctors. The men cannot work with the women. That's not part of their culture. So if they came to the academy and got accepted, they went to the academy for 1 year and then they went to medical school. But it's my understanding that when they graduate from medical school, they will become officers in the Afghan National Army and they'll be able to treat the women as regular doctors would. So that's a major accomplishment. It's morphed into more than what we even imagined in our wildest dreams. While I was in Afghanistan, I questioned God a lot because at home, my apple cart was full, it was ready to go, and then for some reason I'm blaming God for upsetting my apple cart. Why did you put me in this God-forsaken country? I'm reflecting on that as I come out of the dining facility one day. I'm now there about 8 months. And I just get a rigor. I just kind of shook. And it was obvious enough that a young NCO saw me and says, "Colonel, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah. I know why I'm here. To make a difference." He has no idea what I was talking about, but God did, and so did I. When you look at life in general, many times you're going to be asked to answer the call, to accomplish things that you think, I don't have time, I don't have the money, I don't have any types of resources, I don't have support, but you do it anyway. When I did this mission in Afghanistan, people said, it's impossible. You can't do that. Sure you can. I'm a school teacher, and we do the impossible every day.